Tell me what the hell are you scared of when in the end the only
Where's the love? Right here on this podcast. Welcome to Love Drops, where your hosts and One Love ambassadors, Charles and Diane, will share love, hope, and inspirational topics taken from their journey and world events. We will also include on-location recordings and special pop-up guests from cool places all around the world. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the show.
whether big or small, love never fails. Oh, love that conquers all, love never fails.
Welcome to another episode of Love Drops Podcast, and we are so happy that you've decided to listen in and join us. Today, we have a very special guest with a very special conversation. We're going to talk about our fur baby loves. That's right. We're going to be talking about So Touched by Dogs, and we're having this conversation with Anka. So,
Yes, all the way from Spain. Anka, will you introduce yourself to our listening audience?
Well, thanks so much for having me to start off with. So, yes, I'm based in the lovely south of Spain, originally from Germany. I always say I'm one of those multi-passionate souls who doesn't like it at home. So I've lived in a few places before I came to Spain in like coming up to 20 years ago now. And that's also when I started my own business. And it really started the possibility. That's basically when I felt I could finally have my own dog. Right? I've always wanted to have a dog. My theory is my grandparents had my dad's dog. So when I was born and I was, raised there, there was this dog in the house, right? And the story I always got told by my grandma was like, well, people had warned her, be careful to bring a baby into the house when there's an older dog, right? And so she was very conscious of that. So she would always go, okay, so I'd feed the dog, and then together we'd look after the baby, right? So she treated the dog as if he was like an older sibling, very conscious to make sure he wouldn't get jealous. So when you see the pictures, there'd be a little swimming pool and there'd be the dog and me, and I kind of don't consciously remember any of that, but my theory is that that connection of love to dog that for dogs comes from there, In all the years that I went to school and studied and had my, different jobs and lived in different countries, there was always like, oh, I'd love to have a dog, but if I'm working out all day, there was no doggy daycare at the time. I think if it was now with that kind of thing available, I probably would have had a dog decades earlier. But it wasn't until I moved to Spain, started my own business, that I said, so now I'm the boss here. Nobody can tell me I'm not allowed to bring the dog, right? So,
right.
and that's how, I kind of opened up, because I didn't go anywhere to get the dog. I was like, I can't even handle the thought of going to a breeder and buying a dog. That just felt so wrong. I didn't even know, like, that wasn't even an option. And I was worried about going to a shelter because I thought, how am I going to just pick one dog?
Right,
How am I
right.
going to kind of like not feel guilty about the other 50 I leave there? I was like, I don't know. This feels like emotionally a little bit too much to handle. So I basically went on the idea that my dog was going to find me. And turns
Right.
out he did find me very shortly after in the streets of Granada, and that's where it all started.
Wow. I love that. I love that that freeness and that surrender where you say, my dog will find me. I love that you knew in your heart that you didn't want to go to a breeder to get a dog. You didn't want to go to a shelter to get a dog, and you just surrendered to the flow that your dog would find you, and your dog did find you. So I love hearing things like
Yeah,
that.
no, that is truly remarkable. Dogs have so much sense, and they
They
do that
do.
with people. Yes.
And there's three others who found me too, right? So, Leo was just the first. He was the one who opened the floodgates. But, 6 years later, there was another one, and then another one, and now it's number 4. So,
wow. So you're a dog attractor.
seems like it. Yep.
Yeah. So, okay. So what inspired Soul Touched by a Dog? And I asked that tongue in cheek because my first conversation with you, right? It's like we talked about dogs for about 45 minutes. It was like a discovery conversation where we're going to just talk and get to know one another. And we had like 45 minutes of dog stories. And so then we got, we got our vibes together and everything. But it was so funny because I was like, she's going to do something, she's something with dogs because you could tell. I mean, it was no question that there was a passion and a love for dogs with you. So, and then shortly thereafter, Soul Touched by Dogs. So tell us about it.
Well, it's actually it's a funny one because I've had the idea I want to do something with dogs for a very long time. And it was literally inspired initially by what I'm seeing around me. And Spain is not a great example. I mean, being from Germany, right, where you go to restaurants and there's menus, there's the menu, your normal dishes, then there's the kids menu, and then there's the dogs menu, right? So if you go, there's a place near where my parents live. I mean, most places, literally, they will come and they will ask you what they can bring for the dog before they even ask you what you want to drink, right? So it's like, and I've been with the dogs in churches, we've been on boats, we've been in museums, it's like in Germany, in shopping centers, you can take that dog anywhere. And, like dogs are welcome everywhere. So that's kind of how I grew up. That's where I come from, right? So Spain, where culturally dogs, animal in general, but, especially dogs as well, are more looked at. Well, we get a puppy for the kid. So it's a toy, right? And when it gets too big, we get rid of it. And, or it's like a tool. Oh yeah, we like galgos for hunting and racing, and we like these dogs for hunting. Like it needs to be useful in some way. It's a toy, it's a tool that we just kind of maintain with as little as we get away with, right? And if it's no longer useful, then it gets discarded. So there's not,
okay.
There's also something that I've really noticed a lot in personal experience when I'd be out and about with my dogs. Children would come up to me and either the mothers would go and grab them and go, oh my God, there's a dog, careful. Like, sort of this like, for God's sake, it's a little dog, he's not gonna, like he's not gonna do anything, so I'm thinking like, what are you teaching your child here?
Right.
So this ridiculous, unjustified fear, or on the other hand, what was, I think, actually worse is when they allow the children to just like, oh my God, there's a dog. And then they come towards you and they just kind of come and pounce on the dog.
Right.
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 And I remember a situation with the second one who's super sensitive and, and he can growl. I mean, he'd never hurt a fly, but somebody else doesn't know that. Right. So he's kind
Right.
of, can be intimidating. And so this little boy comes up and he's like, oh my God, a dog. And he's just like, what on earth are you doing? And that little boy looked at me as if like, no, he didn't realize that he was doing something wrong. Like nobody had told him that. I'm like, you
Right.
can't just kind of go and touch a dog like from above, from the front. Like, what are you doing? Like, he's like,
Right.
you need to ask me first, like whether you can touch the dog. The dog might not be friendly,
Right.
And
Right.
that little boy really looked at me, and you could tell that was new to him. Like nobody had told him that, right? And I'm
Right.
thinking, well, this is a recipe for disaster, right?
Right.
Because, well, next time he does that with a dog that isn't friendly and he gets bitten, and then the parents, obviously, who were like way there and didn't even turn around, would be right there demanding my dog be put down, and what
Right.
would that little boy learn then, right? So, and I'm like,
Right.
Jesus, that narrative needs to change on a fundamental level. I'm thinking if we leave, if children continue to be educated by their parents, that cycle just continues, and I'm like, God, somebody needs to go into schools and actually teach children a different way of respecting. And dogs are a great place to start, but ultimately it applies to other animals as well, right? And
Right.
so that was kind of the initial, like, this is kind of, this sucks, right? And so then I was like, well, what I really want, like, let's dream big. So I wanted to have this canine center, right? Where it was the main function of it was educational, right?
Right.
It'd be like, okay, going into schools, having like school groups kind of, and there'd be like a rescue, like like there'd be doggy daycare, there'd be a rescue place, there'd be a proper vet, it'd be run like a proper business and not
Yeah.
just some broke hippie girls trying to do their best with no money, right? So it'd be run like a business and it'd have a rescue space, and children would come in and, okay, so you can spend an afternoon here, you can sponsor a dog, you can come and look after a dog, so your parents wouldn't go buy one that you then get bored of and then it gets abandoned, right? So as you
Right.
learn here how to care for a dog and what it involves, and
Wow.
so that was the intention, right? And at the same time, and I'm feeling like I would love a center like that to exist, and all the steps that would be involved in creating that
Mm-hmm.
turned me off. Like, this is like, oh, I don't want to spend my time looking for properties, bureaucracy, fighting with schools. It's like, oh, none of the tasks involved in making that happen. And now you have to go find funding. And none of that lights me up in the least. I'm
Okay.
thinking, I love the thing, but I don't love doing the thing. Right.
Right.
So,
The process.
and I've been sitting on this for years,
Wow.
where I'm like, this is what I want, but I don't want to do what it takes to make it. Right.
Right.
And so there I was, and it was always that conflict, right? Until
Mm-hmm.
you've got to love the universe for things like that. I'm kind of a very enthusiastic writer, and I always study copywriting and this and that. So I'm always in that space. And I stumbled across something like, oh, look, there's a course, how to start a newsletter.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, oh. And all of a sudden it dawned on me. It was literally like, one of those moments when you think, why on earth didn't I see this before?
Mm-hmm.
There I was, and I'm like, so why don't I take a little bit of my own medicine? What I usually teach people, like, people come to me all the time. It's like, hey, how can I take this idea for a passion for a business and make it happen? First
Right.
thing I say is like, what's the smallest step you can take right now with what you already have?
Right.
And I'm like, that's funny. Why didn't that ever occur to me, right? So there was the idea. It's like, well, I could start do something instead of sitting here complaining that I don't want to deal with with bureaucracy. I can start a newsletter. I can just start
Yes.
writing about dogs, and I can collect the information that I want to, my own experiences, all the research that's gone into it, and all the lessons learned, and the frustrations, and then, well, I can kind of compile. It doesn't have to be just my writing. I can compile other resources, so I can make this really helpful for people, right? So that was well, okay, I could do that. It occurred to me on a Saturday, on a Monday, this thing was out in the world, because this is my background. Like, technically, I know how to do this stuff, right?
Wow.
And and then the next thought immediately, you know what it's like when once you're in motion, almost the path
Mm-hmm. Right.
unfolds in front of you. The
Right.
next thing happened that, like, well, to help me grow that audience and to also offer, more valuable content, I can interview people. I've been running a podcast for years. I know how to interview people. I love it. I do it all the time. I can interview dog people, right? So, and I'm like,
Right.
oh, I'm going to call them awesome humans, like people who do awesome stuff for dogs and their people, right? And well, I know some. So, hey, do you want to be? I'm going to interview you for my newsletter. Yes, please, right? So I interviewed the first few people, and then I thought, well, actually, you know what? It's just a couple clicks more to turn that into a podcast.
Yeah.
Okay, so there was the podcast, right? And it's literally one step opens up the next
Right.
opportunity, right?
Right.
So next, initially, I was looking for people who I knew, who one was working in a sort of a rescue space. She makes dog collars also. Like then there was a dog trainer who I knew who kind of has an approach that I really like. Then I knew about a holistic vet, so it's like I kind of knew a few people. And then every time I talk about this, and this is one of those things, as you know, as you've experienced, I can't really
Right.
stop talking about. So every time it comes out, somebody goes, oh my God, you need to speak to so and so. Every
Right.
guest I've had says, oh, I need to introduce you to this other person, right? So it's like, it's kind of snowballing. Next thing I know, I had this company contact me who are doing book marketing. And they go, hey, I did this to this day. I asked them, but to this day I don't know how they found me. They said, well, hey, we've got this couple here, and they actually have this project that they worked for like 15 years to shut down greyhound racing in the States. And it all started with this greyhound that they found in some dodgy racetrack in China and managed to rescue. And they've had this big project on the back of it. And now they've written a book about it. And
Wow.
so the woman goes, would you be open to having them on your show? And I'm like, I think we could talk about that. I had them
Right.
booked in literally the next day, right? So next thing is there's somebody tags me and says, hey, this woman is looking for speakers for a summit that's called the Empowered Dog Lover. It's all about how we as people can be more mindful and calm to help our dogs relax as well, and to kind of look at the relationship not so much from an angle of how can we manipulate a dog to get the dog to do what we want, but like how can we be the peaceful anchor that they can trust, so that that relationship turns into something where we kind of both feed off each other. And I'm like, oh my God, heartwarming. So I kind of get in touch with this woman, and she tells me she's looking for people with big audiences because they want to reach a lot of people. I'm like, well, might want to come later. I've just started. And shortly after, she comes and she says, look, I've had some speakers cancel. Kind of, would you be open to jumping in as a speaker? And I'm like, yes, please. So next thing is I was a speaker on that summit. It's literally like now, and there you meet other people. So now my latest thing is, well, I run summits all the time. Why don't I run a summit? So now I've literally got 3 speakers confirmed, the whole bunch others invited. So I'm going to have my own summit, and off we go. So we'll see what's next. So it's just literally, it was like literally once that first stone was thrown, it's just kind of like sort of unfolds, with
So
but that's where we're at now. So we'll see.
wow. I'm telling you, that was so much. You took off. You were running. I was trying to run behind you because you were saying so much goodness, right? So I'm gonna break it down and then put it back. So the first step was you want to have like the center for dogs, but then it's like, no, I don't want to go through the bureaucracy of it all. I don't want to go through the process. So it was something that you wanted to do, but it really didn't align with your soul because it wasn't enough to just like push you forward. So you just held on to it, and you went on and went on, and you just held on to it because it was indeed a passion. And then one day when the time was right, boom, here's a ad, or you see something about doing a newsletter. So the newsletter very quickly turns into the podcast. You do the podcast, and then that very quickly turns into like summits where you are speaking at a summit. Then you are now fixing to have your own summit where you're organizing the summit. And so I wanted to bring it all together, that once your dream is in motion, that's the important part I wanted to just jump in on. Once your dream is in motion and you just take that first step, like you press go, like what you just did, you press go, and then it just takes off. And it happens very fast. It happens very quickly. So instead of just sitting there and saying, well, I don't know a lot of people to interview on my podcast, and oh gosh, it's going to be so stressful. You just start moving. As soon as you started, all the people, you attracted the people. The holistic point, I wanted Charles to jump in because he has a way with dogs, like with our dog Hopper. He had a way to communicate.
Yeah, with Hopper had so many human traits all throughout. Yeah, we would communicate without saying a word. We would look, nod, look at each other and do it all. It really worked wonders. And when you mention about a holistic vet, holistics, normally when people would hear of a holistic approach to things, they relate it to humans, not pets, not our dogs, but holistic vet. Now that really struck a lot with me. And with Hopper, we communicated on all those levels. So dogs, pets, yes, they have a great deal of intelligence that we need to tap into a little bit more than what we're doing.
They called him
That's
the
so
dog
true.
whisperer. They called Charles the
Mm.
dog whisperer because he would just, with his hands, he wouldn't say anything, just with hand motions. He'd point to the ground, he'd sit, just with fingers, and he'd shake his finger like, no, 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 and he'd stop. Right. So people were like, oh my God, are you a trainer? Are you? And he's like, no, just with Hopper, because they had this alignment. Whereas if I was home and Charles was out somewhere, Hopper would be sitting by me, and every time, 1 to 2 minutes before Charles would come up on the elevator from the garage from parking, Hopper would be at that side window and would be look like he knew he was coming, right? So it's just like that connection, like I love the title, Soul Touched by Dogs, because it is really a soul connection if you allow.
If you allow, I think that is really the key piece to it. And one of the things that makes me love this project every like a little more every day, if that's even possible, is this, the people I've been meeting,
Right.
and it feels like there's almost like a tidal wave of people who start to get that,
Mm-hmm.
that because I've always felt like, yeah, these dogs, mine are always like they know when I'm coming. Like there's other
Right.
cars, that doesn't matter, but they know when mine's coming, right? So there's so
Right.
many things, or they know when it's dinner time. There's so many things where you think there's no rational way to follow and know how they know that and why they know that, and the
Right.
sensitivity and that there is so much to learn from them. So I think
Mm-hmm.
it is a lot more of a mutual like in my ideal world, it's a relationship of mutual respect.
Yeah.
So they're different. They're not any less. They're just different. They have a lot of stuff
Yeah.
that we wish we could have. And I love what you were saying that you could communicate with Hopper without speaking because you know how people always say, oh, like dogs, all they need is to talk. And I'm like, they don't need to talk. Like
Right.
they don't need it. Like it's us who need that. Like
That's it.
they don't need it. They communicate perfectly. And we can too if we allow ourselves to just be in that present and actually listen beyond the ears, basically.
I so agree. And I think it's a vibration. I
Yeah.
think it's a vibration that is communicated. And to be honest, not even so much a language as we know. I feel like dogs transcribe language differently. And the reason I say that is because you can have a dog and you can speak to that dog in Spanish or, just German or whatever.
I
Then
do.
I come and I go to your dog and I just start talking to your dog in English.
Doesn't
And your
matter.
dog will just be able to follow. So it's just like there's this universal language from human to dogs and just animals really, but with dogs that just goes beyond the words. It goes beyond the words. It's like they can feel
Yeah.
like our vibration and our tone and things.
Yeah, totally, totally. And it's just heartwarming to see how many people are now actually spreading that message, that when there is tension and anxiety, that the solution is usually on the other end of the leash, right?
Right,
And that
exactly.
there are these more holistic approaches. It isn't just like pump and full with vaccines and lots of medication, where just like I think to me it feels like a holistic approach to our own medicine is starting to become more accepted and more not mainstream yet, but it's not as, oh my God, this is woo woo, we don't want to know anything about it. I think it's a lot more established now. And it feels to me, with all these people that I've already met and I'm still to meet, that there's quite the wave in the dog space as well, where people recognize that us taking care of our own mental health and
Right.
well-being is the best thing we can do for our dogs, and stop trying to look at this as sort of some mechanic toy where you just kind of
Right.
click and treat and they live. Like, no, there's so much more to get
Yeah.
and contribute, and there's so many people now. It's like I'm just like I tear up like literally every interview I do. Like, this is amazing what people do and the kind of work they're spreading, and really changing that narrative. And I'm thinking, this is so much more powerful than
Yes.
the local center could have ever been.
That part. And that is where I was walking to with you, is a lot of times we have a concept, and it's a grand concept, and it just doesn't get any wind and it doesn't go. So with you, it was just like, no, I want something big. Maybe that's not it. This gives you the more freedom. So like going back to when you were saying all your different jobs and all the different professions that you've come through that prohibited you from having a dog because you're out of the house and you're working, for someone else. But then once you started your own business, right? Then you had the freedom to, hey, I can have a dog, right? So then that's the same thing when you look at the bureaucracy of what that center would have been and then what you are doing now. Because
Yeah.
it's like, hey, there's so much freedom. There's no walls to it. There's no stipulations. There's no regulations saying how you can apply your message and your education. You're free to be, you
Yeah,
know?
and the leverage actually has a lot more potential. If you look at some physical center, there's a certain, well, yeah, you can get known with it, whatever, but still it's a physical center in a particular place,
Right.
versus using the skills I already have and like working in my genius zone. Like, I get to do what I most love to do, to interview people, to connect with people, to write, to like
Yeah.
to do techie stuff. Like, this is like my genius zone. So I'm in my happy place, and I could actually spread the word and offer people a stage that has so much more, that has the potential, already has so much more reach than the local center could have ever had, right?
Yes.
So it's like, it felt like I'm trading in a big dream for a little project, but actually just like a couple of months later, it looks like, well, no, actually it's the other way around.
Exactly. How about that? So I know you mentioned about a summit. So you were a speaker at a summit, which I'm loving this part of your story. And it's a part of you that I was kind of like love at first vibe with you. And that is how you allow the flow. You allow things to just flow together, right? So you're not going to try to force it. It's like, I want a dog, but I'm not going to go to a breeder. I'm not going to go to a shelter. I'm going to just allow for it. And truly you surrender to that, and then and you attract it. You attracted what you allowed for. So you didn't go out and try to seek it down or track it down. You just allowed the space for it to come, right? And
Yeah.
so you're doing the same thing now with your business. So they asked you to be a speaker, and then they said, well, no, maybe not, because you don't have enough followers. And you didn't like freak out or whatever. You said, okay, whatever. And then they came right back for you to speak. That speaking summit, right,
Yeah.
opened up the possibilities to now you're having your own summit. So tell us a little bit about the upcoming summit.
Yeah, the upcoming, I mean, the funny thing is that the remarkable piece, it isn't, it feels like my business and this is merging. a lot quicker than I would have expected. But I'm excited because it's like it's been happening so quickly because all the things that have come, like I already knew how to do,
Right.
right? So it wasn't like if somebody starts from zero, well, they're not going to pull this off in 3 months because like you have a lot more learning to do. But this feels like all the pieces come together at the right time, right?
Yes.
And so I've been hosting summits, business summits for quite a while now for myself, other people. Like that's not new to me, right? So it's just like this is a different topic. And so when I had the idea that I want to host my own summit, it was like, ooh, I know enough to know that I need a juicy topic. I need a good topic that is interesting to people and it's interesting to the speakers who would participate. And then I thought, so what would I most want to focus on? Well, all my dogs are rescue dogs, right? So
Right.
it was like, well, actually, and a lot of the initiative is also driven by this memory that when I first found Leo, or he found me, there was this like, I don't know where to start, and all the information, like none of this makes sense. And you're a little kind of, there isn't much available that works for a traumatized rescue dog. Because a lot of the typical, oh, do this, and if he pulls on the leash, you just stop and turn around. All this stuff requires a certain level of calmness that for that even to work. If you have a totally freaked out, frantic rescue dog who is kind of like in survival mode, none of that stuff will work, right? So there was a whole different level to it. So I thought that's where I want to go, right? And so then a little bit of a brainstorming later, now working title is Panic to Peace.
Panic.
How to ease, like holistic approaches to easing anxiety in rescue dogs.
Wow.
Wow. That,
Got 3 speakers confirmed already and a few others in the pipeline. So,
Wow. So wow. And not panic to peace.
yeah.
Because wow, that is so good. And that is so good because not only will you talk about the dogs, just getting the dogs calm, but it also reaches to the owner because there's a connection right
Yeah.
there. There's a connection. And so even as the owner of maybe a rescue dog that's just panicking and things, you get these tips that you use on your dog. But while you're using on your dog, you're using it on yourself as well. So it just brings a calmness in that whole interaction. Wow, that is
Yeah.
good.
And I mean, part of the speaker I've chosen to invite, well, yeah, like several of them, the core message is, well, the first step is for you to calm down, right? It's like
Yes,
you being calm and creating that space where your dog can relax and trust you. That's really where it goes, right?
that's
So, but and because I'm thinking, well, rescue dogs deserve it, and nothing's more heartbreaking than a rescue dog gets adopted and then brought back because people couldn't handle it. And
right.
with these dogs, we kind of often don't know. Like they sometimes do stuff where you don't see it coming. They might be reactive. They have, or they kind of have anxiety in some person because we often don't like, well, if you mine are from the street, right? I don't know what
Right.
happened to him. I know he ducks
Exactly.
every time he hears a male voice. I know he ducks and he runs, he hides from, fluorescent like uniforms. So like
Right.
there were certain things that Leo did where you can kind of like, yeah, if you're 4 months old, living in the street, yeah, you've probably seen the odd broomstick, right? Being thrown
Yeah.
at you. So you can kind of imagine, but bottom line, like if you get a dog from the street or from a shelter, you don't know what they've been through. Like, and you
That's
don't
right.
know what triggers them. So they can be a little bit more, they require more patience
Right.
and they require you like more compassion, more understanding, more
Right.
acceptance of, okay, like love the dog in front of you and not the dog that you think you want to have, right? So they
Right.
require a little bit more from, or can require a little bit more from an owner. And I think to really give people the knowledge and the trust. And like my topic's always, you need to become the dog owner who's confident in making the decisions
Right.
Trust your own wisdom. Don't
Right.
constantly try and look for somebody else to give you the magic recipe. It's like
Right.
a little bit like parenting, right? So you
Exactly.
can
Exactly.
read books about how to raise a child all day long. In the end, you have to gonna have to be there and be with the child in front of you, and nobody's really giving you a manual. And I think it's the same with dogs, and approaching that whole journey in a different way. That was my talk topic, right? And that's like I'm
Right.
really passionate about that, because we can do so much more, if we stop. Because that's the thing, it's like this won't even work with people, but boy, can't you trick a dog, right? If I go and
Exactly.
sign up for some business strategy, and like I get some program and they tell me, oh, you need to go and outreach to people, and I'm like, that feels so wrong, but well, I can try and do it. That usually doesn't go well to start with. Well, now
Right.
try, when you don't really feel like you know what you're doing, well, how are you going to get your dog to trust you? When your dog can see
That's
you coming a mile
right.
away, like you can maybe rip off, you can kind of like, yeah,
Right. No,
trick
I
some
got you.
people into believing your confidence if it's fake, but boy, you can't trick a dog, right?
A
So that's
dog.
why none of that will ever work if you kind of try and just sort of expect somebody else to tell you what to do. You're always going to have trouble. Like you need to
Yeah.
find your own way of doing it, right? And Charles, looks like you've done that, right?
Yeah, it seemed like the more the owner becomes aware that it's a dualistic approach
Yes.
to deal with the dog holistically, and they'll be dealing with themselves at the same time. At the
Yeah.
same time as the dog is improving, the owner is improving as well. And little do they know, their health will improve also.
That is so true. Like
Yes.
what do you have? You have the dogs. You have in the hospital. We have the therapy dogs that come around, and so the gifts of our dogs are vast. And I want to kind of like pivot over because we could talk until tomorrow for real on this. We can, but it's two things. One, I want to just commend you for knowing your passion and your purpose and not settling. I want to commend you that when it didn't feel right to start that center, instead of just pushing through because you have a passion for dogs, and so maybe it'll feel right on the other end, so you're going to just push through and try to make it happen, to just waiting and allowing things to just flow together at the right time. I want to also commend you for just rescuing the dogs off the street, because not everybody do that. A lot of people just send them to the pound, and then they're just putting these dogs down, but you're giving them a second chance. I want to commend you for that. I do believe that as a result of your heart and as a result of you just allowing things to flow in order, that is what you're seeing with this click, 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 click. Because even though it seems like it's happening so fast, when you think about all the years that you had it shelved, right? So now it's all aligned because you waited at the front end. Now, as you're in motion, it's clicking for you. It's not a force, it's very easy, and things are working out. And I know Panic to Peace is going to be a phenomenal summit. I can't wait to hear more about that. But what I'd like to do is I'd like for you to tell our listeners how they can reach out and how they can support your efforts. What are some things they can do, and how can they contact you?
Well, that's, yeah, lovely. Thank you. Thank you so much. And like it's really heartwarming. Like, yeah, you summed it up perfectly. It really does feel like, finally everything comes together. So the easiest way to get in touch is go to soultouchedbydogs.com. There is the way to find the podcast. There is a way to, get I call them the weekly treats, so that's basically how you get into the community, onto the newsletter, and then you can just hit reply to any email, or you can just email me at anchor@soultouchedbydogs.com. And if you know somebody who has either is a dog professional with a holistic approach, or a connection based trainer, like, or coach. So there's a lot of coaches apparently now who
Yeah.
actually work with dog owners, right? Who kind of
Yep.
approach the whole thing from the person's perspective. So if you know somebody like that who works in this space, I would love to have them on the podcast. If you know somebody who loves their dogs, send them to Soul Touched by Dogs, and help spread the word if it speaks to you.
Awesome. Do you have merch yet, or is that coming
Yeah,
up?
I do. I will not here, but I do actually have I have mugs, Soul Touched by Dogs, where people can
Awesome.
send, you can send a photo of your dog, because it's not no, it's not that much fun if you just get any old mug, but a mug
Right.
with your dog. I've got t-shirts as well, and and I'm actually working on a calendar for next year, and so yeah, definitely the mugs are already have been shipped all over the place. So
Oh,
yeah, mugs and t-shirts we already have.
awesome. And that's on the website.
Yeah, so you have to be on the newsletter to get, as soon as you sign up, you'll go, well, here you can get your mug, here you can get the t-shirts. Yep.
Awesome. And so here we go. Is there any words of inspiration that you'd like to leave to dog lovers, dog owners, just from your journey? Is there any words of encouragement or inspiration you like to say?
There's one thing I wish I stumbled across earlier, and that literally has shifted how I relate to my and any dogs. And that is to remember that your only job as a dog owner is to help your dog relax, nothing more than that. Because any behavior that we find is problem behavior, it's always a result of stress, anxiety, pain. So if we can help our dogs relax, because a relaxed dog just hangs out, they don't do stuff we don't want. And then you have that connection that I love what you're saying, Charles. You could just kind of look at him and he'd know, right? And you don't get that if he's so frantic that he can't even see you, right? So it's that's the only job, because that takes so much of the pressure off.
It really does. And the owner has to have that. And it's there as long as they work with it, and the dog will receive it as well. But it starts with that owner.
Yes.
Yeah.
Wow. That is so great. And this is such a great topic. I am going to just put it out there. We're going to have you back again at another time and talk after the summit. So
I love that.
we would just love, just talk with you, just let the things just continue, because you're probably going to be busy for a while, because I just see this thing really taking off in a great way. And my advice or suggestion or just word of inspiration to you, Anka, is just receive the goodness. Don't allow yourself to become stressed, overwhelmed, or anything about how fast it's coming and how good it's coming for you. Just receive the goodness, because everything that you need will come. You already know that 3 dogs have come. Soul Touched by Dogs have come. Summit speaking, now Summit facilitating. So it's all in the flow. So just stay in the flow of it, and you just stay in your peace, right? Because those dogs that have come and the ones that are coming, they need your peace. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Yes.
Thank you for saying yes. And we will sign off, and we will say, one love.
Never a second will I waste, never an opportunity to taste the sweetness of this life.
Thank you for tuning in to the Love Drops podcast. Be sure to follow this podcast and share the love with everyone you know. Until next time, this is Charles and Diane signing off. One love.
Love it conquers all, whether big or small. Love never fails. Love it conquers all. Love never